Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift through the deserts of West Africa, past shimmering riverbanks and red dust cities, to follow the entire life of the richest man you've probably never heard of, Mansa Musa. You're not starting this story in a marble palace or glittering court, but in a warm hut of woven reeds, somewhere near the banks of the Niger River. It's dry, it's hot, and there's a suspiciously goat-like smell wafting in from just outside the doorway. Still, you have no idea that one day caravans will whisper your name in every corner of the known world, that your face will be sketched onto a European map, holding a chunk of gold the size of a loaf of bread, or that your wealth will crash entire economies. Nope. Right now, you're just a kid with sand in your sandals and dust in your teeth. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where and when you're watching from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born sometime around the year 1280 CE in a region called Mali. It's a land where gold doesn't sparkle in royal vaults. It glints in the river silt and in the crevices of the earth itself. You come from the Keita clan, one of the old lineages claiming descent from the lion-taming kings of yore. And in your early days, life is less about ruling empires and more about avoiding stampeding goats, dodging your older cousin's wrestling games, and falling asleep under a thatched roof to the sound of hyenas laughing far off in the bush. The capital city of Niani is still a whisper on the edge of the savannah. Its mud brick buildings shimmer in the sun, and every morning smells faintly of millet porridge and camel sweat. You grow up running beside traders from Jenne, listening to their tales of salt for gold, of spirits in the dunes, and cities that float on water. You don't know it yet, but Mali is about to become one of the largest empires in African history, and you lucky, dusty child, are its future emperor. Your mother sings to you while pounding grain, and your father disappears for weeks at a time on caravan routes that stretch all the way to the edge of the Sahara. Sometimes you sit near the griots, the oral historians, who recite the names of kings from memory like human libraries. You don't understand half of what they say, but something about the rhythm burrows into your bones. Stories are sacred here, and once they enter you, they never leave. Gold is everywhere. Not in treasure chests or bank vaults. Those don't exist here. No, it clings to life like the dust does. In rings, in nuggets buried near riverbanks, even in the loose flakes that your elders mix into oils and rub into their beards like glittery beard balm. You're too young to realize how rare this is. To you, it just seems like part of the world, like mango trees or sandstorms. Here's a quirky detail for you. In Mali, at this time, people value salt almost as much as gold, maybe even more. That's because salt keeps food from rotting in this sweltering heat. And when you've only got dried meat and sweaty grain to get you through the week, salt is kind of a miracle. People literally carve slabs of salt into bricks and trade them like currency. In fact, you'll grow up seeing men walk around with entire salt slabs strapped to their backs like fragile white shields. Still, gold. Gold does something else. It brings stories. It brings strangers. It brings a trickle of attention that will one day turn into a flood. Even as a child, you notice how people from faraway places, Berbers from the north, traders from Egypt, even a few pale-faced merchants with odd accents, start to show up in your world. They're drawn by rumors of a land where gold lies in the ground like weeds. A land where kings wear golden bangles and commoners toss flecks of it into the river just to watch the water glitter. But back to you. You're not yet a king. Right now, you're just trying to survive your first real sandstorm. It rolls in one day with no warning, turning the sky orange and making your little lungs panic as you hide your face in your tunic. Your grandmother laughs and tells you to breathe through your teeth. Like a lizard, she says. You don't know what that means, but you try it anyway, and miraculously, it works. Historians don't write this part down, of course, but they probably should. You're taught to ride a horse before you're 10. A lean, shaggy beast that seems permanently irritated by your presence. But you hold on. You also learn the Quran, your head swaying gently as you recite verse after verse under a hot sun that never seems to set. Your teacher has a long stick and very few jokes, but the rhythm of the Arabic words becomes part of your inner world, mixing with the sound of distant drums and the constant creaking of camel leather. Now, here's something scholars still debate. Were you actually the emperor's brother, or just his cousin, or maybe not even related at all? The lineage gets a little hazy, and the royal record keepers were more concerned with epic tales than birth certificates. But one thing is certain. You're a part of the ruling elite. Not yet important, maybe, but watching from the edges of the court like a hawk circling above a goat pen. You're there when merchants arrive from Gao, their faces lined with desert wind, bringing tales of empires to the east and cities built on islands of reeds. You're there when envoys arrive from Egypt, their robes finer than anything you've ever touched. And you're there, sitting quietly at the edge of a gathering, when the emperor, your predecessor, makes a very odd decision. He wants to know what lies beyond the ocean, not the river, not the desert, the actual ocean, the Atlantic. Nobody knows what's out there. Monsters, new lands, mermaids with gold teeth? Who knows? But he's determined to find out. So he launches an expedition, 200 ships, thousands of sailors, enough supplies to feed a moving city. He tells you not to worry. He'll be back with answers. He never comes back. No ships return. Not even a whisper on the wind. Just silence. And suddenly, with very little fanfare, you become ruler of Mali. Not because you were groomed for it, not because you wanted it, but because someone had to. And, as luck would have it, your name was next in the hat. Congratulations. You've just inherited one of the largest gold reserves in the medieval world, an empire the size of Western Europe, and a reputation you haven't even begun to earn. No pressure. You don't sleep much that first week as emperor. The palace is still more or less a series of mud brick halls, but now they echo differently. Every time you close your eyes, you remember the image of your predecessor, your uncle, your cousin, your possibly but not definitely blood relative, sailing off into an ocean no one ever dared to cross before. You imagine his ships bobbing somewhere beyond the horizon, sails torn, food gone, sailors arguing about whether mermaids are edible. And now it's your empire, your mess to manage, your endless roster of nobles, griots, generals, salt traders, and wandering holy men who all have opinions about what you should do next. It turns out that becoming emperor doesn't just mean getting better meals. It means dealing with everyone else's indigestion, too. You still sleep in the same courtyard where you grew up, but now your guards sleep just outside it. You still ride the same cantankerous horse, though someone insists on decorating it with golden rains that keep slipping off. You still like roasted millet cakes in the morning, but now 5 different chefs compete to serve them to you, and none of them taste quite like the ones your grandmother made. The empire of Mali, by the way, is massive. From the lush forests of the south to the sun-bleached edges of the Sahara, it stretches like a great lion across West Africa. And it's not just sand and gold, it's people. Dozens of ethnic groups. Traders, warriors, scholars, salt miners, fishermen, farmers, and a few mystics who claim to talk to spirits that live in the baobab trees. You quickly learn that ruling such a place isn't about issuing proclamations from a throne. It's about keeping things from falling apart, especially the trade routes, and especially the caravans. Ah, the camel caravans. Imagine them now. Hundreds of beasts plodding slowly across the golden plains, their shadows long and their footsteps deliberate. Bells jangling softly as they move. You ride with one on your first tour of the empire, the reins itchy in your hands, the desert wind slapping your face with fine red sand. You don't complain, at least not where anyone can hear. You visit Timbuktu. At this point, it's more myth than metropolis. A crossroads town with maybe a couple dozen major buildings and 1,000 hopeful dreams. Traders from North Africa whisper about it like a promised land. The locals? They're just trying to keep the goats from eating the woven awnings. There's a scholar in Timbuktu, though, older than the dunes, with a beard like woven cotton, who teaches you something that will stick. Gold shines, but wisdom echoes. You don't fully get it then, but it sounds important, and you write it down. Or rather, someone writes it down for you, because your handwriting is, to put it gently, still a work in progress. You also start learning more Arabic, because trade, law, and diplomacy across the Islamic world run on Arabic. And since Mali is becoming a major player, you're expected to keep up. Your tutors quiz you under the stars. You practice by eavesdropping on merchants, nodding politely even when you understand about 4 words per sentence. But it's not all sand and syntax. You're also responsible for overseeing one of the strangest, most complicated systems in medieval economics, the gold-salt trade. It goes like this. Your empire sits on giant gold deposits. The north? They've got salt. People need salt. People want gold. So, naturally, the two flow back and forth like ants on a string, meeting at key trading hubs, like Takaza, a mining town where the ground is literally made of salt slabs. Takaza, by the way, smells like boiled socks. The miners there live in salt houses, eat salt-crusted food, and probably have salt in their ears. It's not glamorous, but it's essential. Without salt, the meat spoils, the traders rebel, and your empire gets cranky. One of your first moves as emperor is making sure that these routes stay open and safe. You send guards. You set up outposts. You make deals with local clans who've been hijacking caravans for fun and goat money. You offer them better goat money to stop. Here's where things get weird. Some reports from foreign travelers claim that gold in Mali is so common that dogs wear golden collars and even horses have gold-threaded saddlecloths. Historians roll their eyes a little at that, but then again, they weren't there. Maybe it's true. Maybe you just liked your animals blinged out. No judgment. There's a rumor, probably exaggerated, that you once gave away so much gold during a caravan inspection that the local economy dipped for 3 months. That's not the kind of inflation your advisors enjoy, but it does make for a great campfire story. Somewhere, a griot is already composing a song about it. But it's not all glitter and glory. There's tension bubbling beneath the surface. Some nobles question your right to rule. Others whisper about the old emperor, wondering if maybe he'll come sailing back with sea monsters and kick you out. A few even joke, quietly, about whether you just found the crown on the ground one day. You respond not with speeches, but with strategy. You begin slowly reshaping the court, bringing in loyal advisors, listening more than you talk, and, most importantly, you start dreaming bigger than anyone else ever dared. You want Mali to be more than a merchant empire. You want it to be known, not just in Gao, not just in the Maghreb, not just across the camel routes of the Sahara. You want Cairo to know your name. You want Mecca to see your generosity. You want Andalusia to whisper about your court. And so, an idea begins to form. A dangerous, daring, deliciously dramatic idea. You're going to make a Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. It's a sacred journey required of every Muslim who can afford it. And you? You can definitely afford it. In fact, you can afford to make it unforgettable. So you start planning. And, oh, what a plan it becomes. Thousands of attendants, dozens of camels draped in gold, slaves and servants and singers and scholars, whole mobile kitchens to feed the masses. Gold, not in pouches, but in sacks so large you'll need mules just to carry the coins. You begin issuing orders for artisans to fashion ceremonial gifts. You request finely woven robes and silk cloth turbans from the south, intricate daggers from metalworkers in the east, and ivory-carved Qurans from master craftsmen whose names you barely know but whose reputations glow. You even commission a few golden walking staffs, not for walking, but for dramatic flair. Because why not? You also send word ahead to towns along the way, announcing your passage, requesting peace, promising trade. Your message is clear. Mali is rich, yes, but Mali is also generous. You aim to impress, but also to reassure. This isn't a military campaign. It's a parade of faith. But before you set out, you have to make sure your empire won't collapse while you're away. You appoint a regent, your son, perhaps, or a trusted general. Historians argue about who exactly it was, of course. It's one of those blurry footnote moments. But the point is, you delegate, and not just power. You delegate the morning meetings, the tax disputes, the complaints about grain prices, the arguments over who gets to rebuild which mosque. You spend a full moon cycle training your chosen interim ruler, drilling them with enough advice to fill a scroll the length of a camel's tail. Then, as the moon rises over the savannah and your camels grunt impatiently, you take one last look at Niani, your capital, your home, your legacy and progress. And then you begin the greatest road trip in medieval history. The hooves hit the dirt just after dawn. You're riding near the front of the caravan, eyes squinting beneath the hem of your head wrap. The morning air is already warm, full of baked dust and the smell of date cakes frying in traveling pans. Behind you stretches a line so long it disappears into the haze. Camels, mules, slaves, scholars, cooks, guards, griots, and curious tagalongs who heard that Emperor Musa was headed to Mecca and figured it was safer and tastier to follow you than to go it alone. Some say your caravan numbers 60,000 people. Some say 12,000. Some say those numbers were invented by overexcited storytellers in Cairo trying to impress the Sultan. But however many people are actually with you, it's a lot. Enough to require water scouts who ride ahead to sniff out oases. Enough to spook every goat herder within a 50-mile radius. Enough that each time you set up camp, it feels like a new village gets born and dismantled in a single day. At first, the road isn't so bad. Mali's interior is dusty but forgiving. You pass groves of baobab trees and sleepy markets where children wave and elders bow deeply. People recognize you, or at least they recognize the gold-threaded parasol someone insists on holding over your head. You try to smile regally. It mostly comes off as a sun squint. Then the desert starts, and the jokes dry up faster than the water skins. The Sahara is not just a big sandbox. It is a furnace masquerading as a landscape. The heat bakes the sand until it shines white and tricks your eyes into seeing lakes that aren't there. Camels grunt in complaint. Their feet sink slightly into the dunes with each step. You do not ride in front anymore. You stay nestled in the middle of the column, shaded and fanned and hydrated like a jewel in a golden box. But even with your comforts, it's grueling. You stop more often. You ration water more carefully. At night, you unroll your mat and stare at the stars. More stars than you ever imagined could exist. And wonder how those early Muslim travelers ever made this trek without collapsing. Somewhere deep in the desert, one of your camels keels over dramatically mid-step. It's carrying silk fabrics and gold leaf. There's a moment of panic. Did it die? Did it trip? Was it cursed? A holy man steps forward, mutters some verses, waves a feather, and declares it merely winded. The camel, offended by this diagnosis, immediately spits on him. Still, you push forward, because beyond the sand, you know, lies civilization. Islamic civilization. The northern cities. The fabled ports of learning and faith and art. And your first real stop. Cairo. Ah, Cairo. You've heard about it since you were young. The domes, the mosques, the market stalls teeming with perfumes and scrolls and sandals and jewelry. The Mamluks, those fierce, slave-born warriors who rose to power like lightning and now control Egypt. And of course, the Sultan of Cairo, a man with enough titles to fill a library and enough pride to match. You arrive at the city gates in a swirl of gold dust and speculation. The guards blink at the size of your entourage. You give out small gifts to the people crowding the roadside. Bracelets, coins, fabric. Children run after your retinue singing songs you're pretty sure they made up on the spot. You're invited to stay in one of the Sultan's guest palaces, a modest little mansion with marble courtyards and fountains shaped like lotus petals. The food is exquisite, though you still miss your millet cakes. You find Arabic easier to follow now, but your translator is still overworked, especially when people start debating the metaphysics of charity in front of you. And then comes the famous moment, the one that will echo in history books and lecture halls for centuries. You meet with Sultan al-Nasir. Now, according to some accounts, the Sultan invites you graciously. Others say he expects you to come bowing like a commoner. Some versions claim you resist protocol, others that you comply but with quiet disdain. Historians still argue whether the tension between you two was political, religious, or just two very rich guys side-eyeing each other's outfits. What is certain is this. You give away a lot of gold in Cairo, a truly obscene amount, to the poor, to the scholars, to the merchants, to the doormen. Gold dinars pour into the city like it's a festival day every day. You pay debts you don't owe. You donate to mosques you've never seen. You endow libraries just because you like the way the bricks smell. And Cairo's economy breaks a little. Inflation goes wild. Prices skyrocket. Bread that cost 2 coins now costs 6. Local markets panic. The Sultan's advisors raise their eyebrows so high they almost float off their faces. You, meanwhile, float through the city like a generous breeze. You don't notice the damage. Or maybe you do, and just chalk it up to growing pains. Either way, your caravan rests, refuels, and begins the next leg of the journey. You cross the Red Sea. You step onto the Arabian Peninsula, the birthplace of Islam, and there's a palpable shift in your demeanor. This is no longer about appearances. This is sacred ground. You arrive in Mecca, the holy city, a place of unity, of prayer, of pilgrimage. Here, you are not an emperor. You are simply a pilgrim among thousands. You walk the same path, recite the same prayers, circumambulate the Kaaba alongside Berber traders and Yemeni farmers and Persian scholars. There is something humbling about it, something real. And though your servants still fan you discreetly and your tent is still embroidered with gold, you feel it, the tug of faith, the equalizing force of devotion. When it's done, when the rites are complete and your heart is full and your soul feels rinsed clean by sun and prayer, you begin the long road home. But not empty-handed. You return not just with spiritual renewal, but with something else. Connections. You've met scholars from Damascus, architects from Cairo, poets from Shiraz, and you invite many of them to Mali. Because your next dream is even bigger. You don't just want Mali to be wealthy. You want it to be wise. You want Timbuktu to rival Cairo. You want your empire to be a beacon of scholarship and faith and style. But we're getting ahead of ourselves again. For now, the camels are grumbling, the desert is calling, and the return journey begins, with a lighter heart and a caravan slightly shorter by several 100 pounds of gold. The wind greets you differently on the way back. Less scorching, more deliberate, like the desert itself knows that you've changed. You left Mali a monarch with gold to spare. You return not just as a legend, but as a man on a mission. You've knelt at the Kaaba in Mecca, bartered ideas in bustling Cairo, and learned from the best minds in the Muslim world. Now, you want to turn Mali into something more. Your caravan isn't as heavy as when it left, at least not in gold. You spent much of that, remember. Cairo still hasn't forgotten. But what you've brought back is heavier in a different sense. There are scrolls in Arabic and Persian, books you can't even read but know are important. There are architects, astronomers, clerics, and poets, all curious about this kingdom that seems too rich to be real. And yes, some of the camels smell faintly of cinnamon. You may have raided Alexandria's spice market once or twice, but before Mali, there's still a lingering issue. Egypt. You remember how the Sultan's scribes had to invent new ledgers to track your generosity? Well, generosity comes with side effects. Inflation has exploded across Cairo and its satellite cities. Prices for bread have doubled. Textiles have become luxury items overnight, and gold itself, has been devalued by its sheer abundance. Traders curse your name with reverent annoyance. So, when a nervous Egyptian official meets you near the coast with an overly polite tone and an overly long scroll, you know what's coming. He bows. He smiles. He gestures vaguely at economic stabilization. And you nod. Rather than retreat or dismiss it as not your problem, you do something unexpected. You borrow gold from the very markets you flooded. A gesture of diplomatic balance, perhaps. Some say it was a savvy political move. Others think you simply didn't want to make enemies before you were safely out of their territory. Whatever the reason, the move quiets tensions. You repay the loan later with interest. And Egypt lets out a cautious sigh. By the time you reach Mali again, stories have already begun to beat you home. Word travels fast when it involves gold-draped elephants and a man who hands out nuggets like they're mangoes. From the Berber oases to the edge of the Senegal River, your tale has expanded. You're not just Mansa Musa now. You're the sultan who shimmered, the pilgrim who bankrupted a kingdom, the emperor who tipped the scales of trade. You return to a people eager, confused, a little dazzled. And you begin to build. But not just palaces or vaults for gold. You begin with Timbuktu. Timbuktu, your dusty gem of a city near the Niger, has always been a lively place, where salt slabs are traded like currency, and griots sing of ancestral glories over calabash beer. But you see something else in it. You see a city of scrolls, of syllables, of secrets passed between students in low whispers under the shade of acacia trees. So you do what any wealthy dreamer with architectural ambition might do. You build a mosque. Not just any mosque, but one designed by Abu es Haq es Saheli, an Andalusian architect who joined your caravan after Mecca. The Jingweraber Mosque rises from the Sahel like a sandcastle made sacred, its walls of sun-baked mud brick, its wooden beams poking out like ribs to help with annual repairs. It isn't flashy in the way of Cairo's minarets or Mecca's marble, but it breathes, it belongs. And then come the madrasas. You fund centers of learning that do more than teach the Quran. They debate ethics, astronomy, poetry, and law. You stock them with scholars. Egyptians, Moroccans, even one old man from Damascus who insists he can calculate the distance between stars by watching the shadows of birds. You nod politely and fund him anyway. You also commission scribes, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They work by candlelight, copying texts brought back from your pilgrimage. They write in Arabic, sometimes Bambara, and often both. They copy manuals on medicine, treatises on legal theory, even bizarre recipes involving saffron, tamarind, and dried fish eyes. One scroll, now lost to time, was said to detail how to tame a snake using only dates and flattery. And then there's your boldest move. You make learning fashionable. In a time when status is measured in gold and wives, you declare that owning books is a mark of nobility. You begin gifting scrolls as rewards to loyal generals. You encourage merchants to sponsor student lodgings. You host debates on theology in the palace courtyard and invite entire villages to listen. You even start showing up to public sermons, not to preach, but to learn. Historians still argue whether Timbuktu became an intellectual center because of your planning or whether it bloomed naturally over time. Some say you simply planted the seeds and walked away. Others credit your direct involvement. Either way, by the end of your reign, Timbuktu becomes known across the Islamic world as a place where learning thrives, even in the dust. But while your ambitions are grand, ruling Mali still requires diplomacy. Or, to be more accurate, balance. Your empire is enormous, remember? It stretches from the Atlantic coast across rivers, mountains, and desert trails. And not everyone within it is thrilled about your golden touch. The Mossi, to the southeast, remain stubbornly independent. You try persuasion, then patrols, then more persuasion. It's an ongoing negotiation, really. Part dance, part chess match. Within your core provinces, you keep order through a mixture of tradition and innovation. You appoint governors, many from local noble families, to oversee regions. But you also create inspection tours. Your envoys travel with small staffs, collecting complaints, resolving disputes, and sending back reports. You even start keeping records of tax collection, something rarely done before at this scale. And you fund public projects, wells, roads, rest stops for caravans. You encourage the planting of fruit trees near traveler roads, not because it's profitable, but because tired merchants talk, and the stories they spread can build empires faster than armies. Meanwhile, your court becomes a melting pot. Arabic blends with Bambara. Songhay cooks swap recipes with Berber scribes. There are scholars from Fez and merchants from the Horn of Africa. One week, you host a visiting poet who composes verses comparing the Niger River to the breath of God. The next, a healer from Gao shows your doctors how to treat eye infections using pulverized kola nuts and fish oil. Some of it works, some of it smells terrible. But you try anyway. You even expand the trade routes. Your armies escort caravans farther north into the Sahara, protecting them from Tuareg raiders. You establish resting stations stocked with water jars and firewood. And you create a merchant guild, loosely organized but incredibly effective. Gold still flows, but now it's smarter, more sustainable. And you? You begin to feel something unusual for a man your age. Hope. Hope that Mali can be more than wealthy. Hope that it can be remembered not just for gold, but for wisdom. And slowly, as the scrolls pile up in Timbuktu, and laughter spills out of student dormitories late into the night, you begin to believe that maybe, just maybe, it will. You don't sleep much these days. Not because you're anxious, though ruling an empire the size of Western Europe certainly comes with the occasional headache, but because your mind refuses to settle. Even at night, when the crickets chatter and the wind rustles the palm fronds like a chorus of tiny drums, you lie awake, imagining things that don't yet exist. A second mosque, taller, that stretches its shadow farther over the sandy earth. A new university in Gao, where scholars debate the stars and the nature of the soul. A bustling market where traders don't just exchange spices and gold, but barter ideas, poems, and wisdom. You've become something of a philosopher king, though no one dares say that to your face. Not because they fear you, but because the idea still feels new and strange. You've reshaped what a king can be, not just a warrior, not just a giver of gold, but a cultivator of culture. And so, one sticky evening, you summon your closest advisors to your chambers. They arrive with robes dragging in the red dust, faces weary from the day's heat, eyes half-lidded with sleep. You unroll a scroll before them and speak calmly but firmly. Let's talk about succession. Instant silence. Most kings avoid this subject like a swarm of locusts. No one wants to imagine themselves dead, especially not a man who's just hit his stride and commands the largest empire the world has seen in centuries. But you understand that legacy isn't just what you do. It's what happens after you're gone. You've witnessed the chaos that follows rulers who skip this step. Cousins stabbing cousins. Cities burned to ashes. Families torn apart by greed and power struggles. You will not allow Mali to descend into that. Your eldest son, Magan, is bright and curious, though slightly allergic to horsehair, a detail that has earned a few chuckles among your court physicians. He's bookish, not a warrior, but you like that. More importantly, he listens. You begin training him the slow way, by asking questions instead of handing down orders. Maghan accompanies you on small missions, arbitrating a land dispute near the Senegal border, overseeing a new caravan outpost, even managing a small delegation to negotiate with neighboring chiefs. He stumbles at times. Everyone does. But he learns quickly. Still, you're not ready to hand over the reins just yet. There's still work to be done. Your empire, remember, stretches across rivers, mountains, and deserts, from the Atlantic coast far into the Sahara's edges, and not all who live within it are thrilled by your golden touch. The mossy kingdoms to the southeast remain stubbornly independent. You try persuasion first. When that fails, you send patrols. Then return to persuasion. It's an ongoing dance of power and diplomacy, a chess match played with spears and words. Closer to home, you maintain order through a mix of tradition and innovation. You appoint governors, usually local nobles with ties to the land, to oversee regions. But you also send royal envoys on inspection tours. These envoys travel with small staffs, collecting complaints, resolving disputes, and sending back reports. For the first time, you begin keeping detailed tax records, something unheard of in these parts before. Your scribes and administrators work diligently to track who owes what, making sure no one escapes their duty, but also that no one is unfairly burdened. Public projects become your passion. You fund wells to water thirsty travelers and roadside rest stops where merchants can shelter under broad-leafed acacias, drinking cool water from clay pots. You encourage the planting of fruit trees along trade routes, not because the fruit is valuable, but because tired merchants talk, and stories of a generous empire spread faster than any army. Your court becomes a vibrant melting pot. Arabic blends with Bambara. Songhay cooks swap recipes with Berber scribes. Scholars from Fez arrive, bringing books and ideas. Merchants from the Horn of Africa exchange exotic goods. One week, a visiting poet composes verses comparing the Niger River to the breath of God. The next, a healer from Gao shows your doctors how to treat eye infections using pulverized kola nuts and fish oil. A treatment that smells terrible but works surprisingly well. You try everything, always experimenting, always pushing the boundaries of knowledge. Your empire's influence grows. Smaller kingdoms and city-states at the edges of your realm begin pledging allegiance. They've heard the stories of safe caravans, thriving markets, and a king who gives gold away and still seems to have more. In Tekrur, elders send you a ceremonial spear wrapped in dyed bark, a symbol of fealty and respect. In return, you send them a physician and a master builder to improve their fortifications and health. In the salt mines near Taghaza, workers pled for protection against raiders, and you dispatch cavalry with a letter ending in a poem about salt being the breath of the earth, a touch of whimsy that never fails to delight your correspondents. Your road improvements continue, transforming rough desert trails into reliable trade arteries. You install water jugs in shaded pits, erect domed shelters shaped like overturned calabashes, and ensure caravanserais are stocked with firewood and fresh dates. It's during one of your inspection tours that you fall ill. Nothing dramatic. No enemy's arrow, no curse whispered in the night. Just a fever that won't abate. Your joints ache as if weighed down by invisible stones. Your sleep becomes restless. Your appetite vanishes like the morning mist. Physicians fuss over you, concocting foul-smelling pastes made from roasted kola nuts, fermented honey, and a suspiciously crunchy ingredient you dare not ask about. You drink them all dutifully, though none bring relief. Gradually, you scale back your activities. You stop leading court in person, delegating from behind carved ebony doors. Visitors hear your voice but rarely see your face. Rumors circulate. Some say you've gone blind, others claim you've grown horns. Ridiculous, of course, but you don't correct them. You've learned to let the stories grow, like the legends that will one day surround your name. Despite your illness, Mali thrives. Merchants continue to come, drawn like moths to the golden flame of your court. Scholars arrive clutching manuscripts as if they were precious goats. Pilgrims detour hundreds of miles just to pass through Timbuktu's mud brick minarets and whisper prayers beneath the stars. And your scribes begin writing about you. You catch one of them composing a poem. He gave gold like rain and knowledge like sun. You chuckle softly and correct the meter. You don't crave worship, not really. But legacy? That's something else entirely. You begin dictating stories to your griots. Tales of Sundiata, your great-uncle, yes, but also of your own life. You downplay grandeur and highlight values, hospitality, learning, and balance. One evening, as dusk melts into that velvety West African night, your son enters your chamber. He kneels silently. You study him. He has grown. His shoulders are broader, his gaze steady. There's something in the way he holds himself. Not arrogance, but readiness. You speak 3 words. It's your turn. No coronation, no parade, just a quiet handoff, like a torch passed in the dark. Historians still argue whether you officially abdicated or simply faded away. Some accounts say you traveled on a final pilgrimage that never quite ended. Others claim you died quietly in Niani, surrounded by family and scrolls. One legend says your tomb lies beneath the Niger River, guarded by singing crocodiles. You like that one? But endings aren't what you think about. You are still dreaming of cities with libraries instead of walls, of futures where power is shared, not hoarded, of a Mali remembered not for gold, but for the minds it shaped and the stories it told. Your body may slow, but your imagination never does. And even as the sun sets a little earlier each evening, you watch it with quiet satisfaction. Because gold may glitter. But wisdom, that is what truly shines. You awaken to the soft, golden light of dawn filtering through your window, the gentle hum of life stirring beyond your chamber walls. The city of Niani stretches out quietly beneath a sky slowly blushing pink with sunrise. Somewhere in the distance, a muezzin's call to prayer drifts through the warm air, wrapping itself around the scent of freshly baked millet bread and the earthy aroma of drying leather from the tannery. The morning sounds are familiar. The clatter of wooden carts over packed dirt streets, children chasing each other, their laughter ringing like bells, and the occasional bleat of goats nibbling at the sparse greenery. But today is unlike any other morning. You feel it in your bones, a subtle shift in the rhythm of life, a quiet anticipation humming beneath the usual hustle. You sit up, the light breeze teasing the edges of your robes, and turn to see your son Magan standing near the doorway, steady and grown in ways he wasn't even a year ago. His eyes meet yours, calm but determined, carrying the weight of unspoken promises. You reach out and hand him the leather-bound ledger, the detailed records of the empire's wealth, laws, and endless ambitions. This is not just a book. It is the very heart of Mali's order and continuity. It's the symbol of what you've built, and now what he will inherit. Your fingers linger on the embossed gold lettering as Magan's hand closes over the volume. You feel a swell of pride mingled with a touch of wistfulness. You think back to your own youth, to the restless days when the throne was just a dream far off in the dusty horizon. How you once stumbled through uncertain beginnings, and how you came to understand that ruling wasn't about the glint of gold or the weight of a crown. It was about the slow, steady weaving of people and land into a lasting tapestry. Maghan is not yet king in the traditional pompous sense. There is no grand coronation today, no trumpets blaring from the palace towers. Instead, there is a quiet, almost sacred handoff. This is Mali's way, gentle but firm, like the passing of a torch in the fading dusk. You watch as he closes the ledger with a soft thud and bows his head. A moment of silence lingers between you, filled only by the distant murmur of the Niger River and the faint rustling of palm leaves. The realm you leave him is vast and diverse. Your empire spans from the bustling marketplaces of Timbuktu to the wind-swept salt mines of Taghaza, from the fertile banks of the Senegal River to the endless dunes of the Sahara's edge. But ruling such an expanse is no simple task. You've seen the fragile threads that hold it together. Alliances forged through marriages, treaties penned on animal hides, caravans braving the desert heat to bring back riches and news. Borders are not just lines on a map. They are living, breathing lines of negotiation and tension. You know well the mossy kingdoms to the southeast remain fiercely independent, wary of Mali's reach, their warriors ready to defend their lands with spears and strategy. You've dealt with these complexities by balancing force with diplomacy, reminding yourself daily that kingdoms are less like iron walls and more like gardens, requiring constant tending. Maghan approaches his rule with cautious wisdom. He is a careful student of your teachings, even if his manner is less grandiose than yours. There's a softness to his approach, a willingness to listen that you admire, even if it sometimes frustrates your old impatience. His first acts as king involve reinforcing the caravan routes you labored over for years. Bandit raids still haunt the desert roads, and merchants risk their lives to ferry gold, salt, and spices between cities. Under Maghan's watch, patrols increase, resting points improve, and water wells dot the trails more densely. The caravans grow safer, and with them, trade flourishes. Beyond security, Maghan has a vision closer to your own heart. Knowledge as a pillar of power. He expands the libraries of Timbuktu, commissioning scribes to copy and translate texts from across the Islamic world, from Egypt to Andalusia. Scholars gather in courtyards beneath woven canopies, their fingers tracing verses in Arabic and Songhay alike. The city hums with the soft sound of ink on parchment and murmured debates on philosophy, astronomy, and theology. These are quieter victories, but no less vital than battles won with sword and shield. Still, ruling never loses its thorny edges. Some nobles grumble about the young king's reforms, wary of change that might shift the delicate balance of their own power. You recall your own challenges, the careful negotiations, the compromises forced by stubborn tradition and ever-shifting loyalties. The tension along the western banks of the Niger simmers. Small skirmishes flare up among local chiefs whose loyalties waver. Yet Maghan stands firm, steady as the ancient baobab, learning the slow art of patience and persuasion. In the bustling markets, you hear of Maghan's continued generosity. Gold, the glittering lifeblood of your empire, still flows freely during festivals and ceremonies. Gifts are sent to distant rulers not as bribes, but as bonds of friendship, ensuring Mali remains a respected player on the broader stage. You like to imagine the smiles behind those courtyards, the soft clinking of gold coins carried carefully in silk pouches. Your own days grow quieter. You retreat more into the palace gardens, where the fragrance of jasmine and neem trees drifts lazily on the breeze. You watch the children playing under the shade of baobabs, their laughter a balm to the soul. The gentle murmur of the Niger, winding like a silver ribbon through the land, seems to soothe even your restless spirit. Stories of your reign become woven into the fabric of Mali's history. Griots, keepers of memory and song, begin to sing your name alongside the greats. Manuscripts circulate, describing the king who gave gold like rain and wisdom like sunlight. Scholars debate fiercely whether you truly were the richest man of your time, and if wealth can ever be measured in gold alone, or if it is the legacy of ideas, generosity, and culture that endures longest. There are rumors, too. Some say you vanished on a final pilgrimage to Mecca, a journey never quite completed. Others whisper of crocodiles singing beneath the Niger River, guarding your tomb with haunting melodies. You don't mind the stories. You've learned to let legends grow. They are the gentle magic that time weaves over mortal lives. On a warm evening, as the sun melts behind the horizon and the sky deepens into a velvet canvas dusted with stars, Magan kneels beside you in the garden. His eyes shine with the quiet strength of a man ready to bear the weight of a vast empire. You place your hand on his shoulder and say simply, "It's your turn." No fanfare, no grand ceremony, just the peaceful passing of a dream, the steady heartbeat of Mali's future. Historians still argue whether you ever officially abdicated, or if your fading presence was simply absorbed into the whispers of time. But you know the truth. Kings come and go, but the spirit of a people, rooted in kindness, knowledge, and resilience, lives forever. And so, as night drapes the land and the cool desert air carries the soft sounds of distant drums and prayers, you close your eyes. Your story, like the Niger's winding course, will flow on, endlessly, quietly, and beautifully. The days fold softly into nights, like the delicate petals of a desert flower unfolding at dusk. You find yourself watching Magan with a mix of pride and quiet relief, as he settles into his role as Mali's ruler with a grace you hadn't quite expected. It's a subtle transformation, not marked by grand ceremonies or bold proclamations, but by the steady weaving together of the vast threads of your empire's fabric. The Mali you leave him is growing not only in wealth and land, but in culture, scholarship, and a gentle diplomacy that feels both new and timeless. You hear tales drifting back from the bustling markets of Timbuktu, where the city now hums with life and possibility. Its mud brick buildings glow warmly in the fierce afternoon sun, and the carved wooden doors open onto shaded courtyards where scholars gather. They debate in hushed tones about poetry, astronomy, and theology, weaving ideas from across Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. Timbuktu is no longer just a trade hub for gold and salt. It has become a beacon of knowledge, a desert oasis where ideas travel faster than the caravans ever could. You remember your own caravan journeys across the vast Sahara, the endless sea of golden sand shimmering under the merciless sun. You recall the delicate balance between risk and reward, the trusting nods exchanged with Tuareg guides who navigated hidden wells and secret passes, and the nights spent under star-studded skies, listening to griots recount ancient epics. These journeys brought not only wealth, but wisdom. Manuscripts in Arabic, tales of distant lands, medical texts filled with remedies you never imagined, and sometimes curiosities that made you smile. Did you know that some scholars debated whether the world was round or flat long before those ideas reached Europe? Historians still argue about just how widespread such knowledge was, but there's no doubt that Mali's courts were alive with intellectual curiosity. Yet, ruling an empire that sprawls from the lush banks of the Niger to the harsh edges of the Sahara is never without challenges. The desert winds carry whispers of unrest along the fringes, where distant chiefs and rival kingdoms test the limits of their loyalties. The Mossi to the southeast remain stubbornly independent, wary of Mali's growing influence. Bandits still lurk in the shadows of the caravan routes, though Maghan's patrols are diligent. Each day is a careful balancing act, delegating power to trusted governors, settling disputes with quiet diplomacy, and maintaining the intricate network of alliances that hold the empire together. Maghan approaches governance with a thoughtful, even gentle hand. You see echoes of yourself in his leadership style, sometimes cautious, sometimes bold, but always marked by a willingness to listen. His reforms strengthen the administration. Tax records are more detailed, courts more organized, and trade regulations more consistent. Yet these changes don't come without resistance. Some nobles whisper concerns in shadowed corners, fearing that their ancient privileges might erode under the steady tide of modernization. You chuckle quietly to yourself, remembering how your own early reign was peppered with similar grumbles. Power, after all, is less like an iron rod, and more like the Niger itself, ever-flowing and difficult to grasp. Amidst these political shifts, daily life in Mali pulses with a comforting rhythm. You imagine the scent of fresh bread wafting from clay ovens, mingling with the earthy aroma of drying leather in the tannery. Artisans craft exquisite pottery, their hands moving with practiced ease, while traders barter over vibrant cloths and fragrant spices beneath colorful canopies. Women gather at the wells, sharing stories and laughter as children dart between them, their feet kicking up soft dust. It's these small, ordinary moments that truly anchor the empire, grounding the grand visions in human experience. One of Maghan's proudest achievements is his patronage of Timbuktu's scholarly institutions. The Sankore University blossoms from humble beginnings into a renowned center of learning. Students from across Africa, the Middle East, and even as far as Spain arrive, eager to study theology, law, mathematics, and medicine. Libraries fill with scrolls and manuscripts, some painstakingly copied by hand, others carefully translated into local languages. You smile, picturing scholars debating under the shade of date palms, cups of sweet mint tea steaming beside them. They discuss everything from celestial movements to legal codes, their voices low and earnest. In fact, historians still debate the extent to which such knowledge influenced European Renaissance thinkers, but there's no doubt that Mali played a vital role as a crossroads of ideas. Still, for all its grandeur, Mali's story is also one of simple joys and everyday struggles. You think of the market vendors arranging colorful piles of kola nuts and shea butter, the gentle splash of water at the communal wells, and the soft crooning of lullabies sung to restless infants. It's a reminder that empires are built not just on gold and conquests, but on the quiet, persistent heartbeat of human lives. As twilight descends, you imagine the city settling into a calm hush. The calls to prayer echo softly from mosques, and the distant sound of drums marks the start of evening festivities. The desert air cools, carrying the scent of jasmine and crushed herbs. You feel a deep sense of peace knowing that your son and your legacy are in capable hands. Maghan's reign may still be young, and historians continue to argue about whether his cautious reforms were a gentle evolution or a subtle revolution in Mali's history. Was he a caretaker of tradition, or a quiet innovator pushing the empire toward a new age? Perhaps he was both, navigating the complex currents of change like a seasoned mariner, steering through shifting tides. Your journey may be drawing to a close, but the story you helped begin will ripple through generations, carried on the wind, sung by griots, and recorded in the ink of scholars. The richness of Mali is not just in its gold, but in its enduring spirit, a tapestry woven with kindness, knowledge, and the enduring hope of a people who thrive in the heart of the desert. As the stars emerge overhead and the night embraces the land, you breathe in the cool desert air and close your eyes. Tomorrow is another day for Mali, for Magan, and for all who call this land home. The first light of dawn spills softly over the vast sands stretching endlessly beneath the African sky. You find yourself walking alongside a boy named Musa, the son of Magan, the reigning Mansa, or Emperor of Mali. At this point, Musa is just a child, unaware of the immense wealth and legacy that will one day shape his life and ripple across continents. But as you wander the busy streets of Niani, the empire's heart, the air is thick with the scent of roasted millet and the lively chatter of traders preparing for caravans. This is the world into which Musa is born, a world of opportunity and responsibility, of ancient traditions and restless ambition. Imagine the prince as he watches camel caravans arriving from the Sahara, their beasts laden with salt, gold, and exotic goods like silks and spices from distant lands. The traders' voices rise and fall in a gentle hum, negotiating prices with a ritualistic patience. Camels shuffle, their padded feet stirring up soft clouds of ochre dust. Nearby, women grind millet, their rhythmic pounding providing a steady drumbeat to the day. Musa's eyes follow the stream of goods and people, curious and eager, even though his feet have yet to step on the long journey across the desert that will later define his legend. You can almost hear the faint, melodic call of the griots, oral historians and storytellers, whose songs weave the past and present into vibrant tapestries. They sing of kings and battles, of wisdom and justice, their voices lilting under the shade of baobab trees. It's a sensory feast, the musky scent of leather harnesses, the clinking of bronze jewelry, the sharp tang of freshly cut dates. Musa grows up enveloped in this rich cultural symphony, learning lessons both spoken and unspoken. Despite the empire's grandeur, life is balanced by simplicity and routine. Children run barefoot across sun-baked earth, their laughter mingling with the steady hum of marketplaces. You might smile at the thought of the peculiar remedies used by local healers, like the crocodile dung sunscreen, a practice that sounds strange today but was a practical protection against the relentless sun. Historians still debate how much medical knowledge in Mali was transmitted orally versus written down in the flourishing libraries of Timbuktu. But what's clear is the intimate relationship between the people and their environment. Musa's education begins early, guided by learned tutors who teach him Arabic, Islamic theology, and the principles of governance. You imagine quiet afternoons spent reading illuminated manuscripts, the gentle scratch of reed pens and the soft rustle of parchment. His lessons emphasize balance between justice and mercy, tradition and innovation, wealth and generosity. The boy learns that ruling an empire is less about power and more about service, an idea that will deeply influence his later actions. The young prince watches as his father, Magan, manages the empire with steady hands. You picture court scenes where ministers debate policies over fragrant cups of tea, the aroma mingling with the scent of sandalwood incense. Musa listens carefully, absorbing the nuances of diplomacy and leadership, even when the conversations seem tedious to a child's restless mind. Perhaps he even whispers to himself a joke about how emperors are just grown-up children who never quite outgrow the need for bedtime stories. Only these stories decide the fate of millions. Outside the palace walls, Mali pulses with the vibrant rhythms of daily life. You imagine the spinning wheels of weavers crafting indigo-dyed cloth, their fingers expertly weaving patterns that tell stories without words. Farmers tend to their fields along the fertile banks of the Niger, while fishermen cast nets in calm waters, their boats rocking gently under a cloudless sky. At night, the call to prayer echoes softly, threading the towns and villages into a shared moment of peace and reflection. The broader world beckons too. Mali's trade routes stretch far, connecting with the Mediterranean and even parts of Asia. Caravans depart from Timbuktu, laden with gold and salt, traveling across the Sahara's daunting expanse. You feel the weight of anticipation as Musa witnesses these journeys, sensing the vastness beyond his homeland. Historians still argue about how much these early experiences shaped his famous pilgrimage to Mecca. Did he see it as a sacred duty, a political statement, or a chance for personal growth? Likely all of the above. Amid the empire's prosperity, Musa also grows familiar with the subtler realities of power. The delicate balance of court intrigue, the quiet tensions between noble families, and the importance of maintaining harmony among diverse peoples. You imagine him learning the art of patience, of listening more than speaking, and of leading with quiet confidence. There's a gentle humor in picturing the young prince quietly observing his advisors, maybe rolling his eyes when they indulge in petty squabbles, because even kings in training have their limits. As the days lengthen, Musa's world expands beyond the palace. He visits schools where children learn poetry and arithmetic under the shade of date palms. He walks through gardens where fruit trees heavy with mangoes and figs offer sweet relief from the sun. You almost taste the honeyed sweetness of fresh dates and the tartness of tamarind, a reminder of the empire's bounty. Musa's childhood is a careful dance between wonder and responsibility. The weight of the golden crown presses lightly on his young brow, a symbol not just of wealth, but of the people who depend on his future reign. You can hear the whispers of the desert wind, telling tales of the man he will become. Generous, wise, and unforgettable. As the sky darkens and the first stars peek through the twilight, you take a deep breath and settle into the quiet magic of this moment. The story is unfolding, slow and steady, like the steady footsteps of a camel caravan crossing the Sahara. There's comfort in the rhythm, in the gentle unfolding of a life that will one day shine brighter than the desert sun. You're not just a bystander. You're part of the journey now. And as you close your eyes, you imagine the soft glow of lanterns in distant tents, the murmur of prayers, and the hope that even the smallest moments can lead to greatness. The weight of the crown settles more heavily on your head than you ever imagined. You are no longer just Musa, the pious son of Fagalay and heir to the throne. With the quiet, dignified passing of your predecessor, Magan, your uncle, the title of Mansa now belongs to you. But it isn't simply a title, is it? It's a mantle woven from gold and expectation, soaked in the sweat of centuries of rulers who came before. You feel it the moment you step through the halls of the palace in Niani, past thick stone walls that seem to whisper tales of past rulers into your ears. The air smells of dust and myrrh, of worn parchment and long silenced gongs. You're not the first young man to inherit an empire, but it certainly feels like you've been handed something more than just a map and a crown. You're walking into the dreams of your ancestors, and into the expectations of a people spread across savannas, rivers, and deserts. You are their sun and their shelter. No pressure. Still, there's something grounding about it all. Maybe it's the rhythm of tradition, the procession of griots reciting your lineage as you take your seat, the bass of drums thudding gently in your chest, the incense curling like snakes toward the sky. No rebellions, no uprisings, just the quiet acceptance of a new leader who has already proven himself as a steward of the realm during Abu Bakr's mysterious journey eastward. You begin your reign carefully, not with a wave of reforms or royal decrees, but with something more strategic, listening. You sit with traders, elders, scholars, and mothers who bring their sons to your court and ask, with trembling voices, for justice. You don't always have the right answer, but you always listen. That alone sets you apart. One of your first moves is education, of course. You don't just want subjects, you want minds. Bright, curious, ambitious minds. You commission the expansion of schools and ask scribes from Timbuktu to travel and set up learning centers across smaller towns. Not just theology, though, yes, Quranic instruction remains a cornerstone, but math, astronomy, medicine, and even philosophy. You also fund translation houses, because while Arabic is the language of scholars and commerce, you believe that knowledge should be available in Mande languages too. Picture this. Rows of young boys and girls seated on rush mats beneath baobab trees, repeating verses under their breath, their fingers tracing Arabic calligraphy on wooden tablets. A chorus of softly spoken dreams. But you're not satisfied with teaching minds. You want to feed them too. You recognize that education means little if people go hungry. So, you turn your gaze toward the fields and granaries. You invest in farming, digging canals, distributing seed stock, improving irrigation. You assign local leaders to inspect harvest yields and ensure markets are fairly supplied. In exchange, you ask them to keep detailed records of who eats and who doesn't. It's your way of creating a decentralized but deeply accountable system of support. And then, like a pull in your chest that won't quiet down, you begin to think about Mecca. It's not just religious obligation, it's magnetic. The idea of a Hajj had been planted in your mind as a child. Hearing griots speak of vast deserts and foreign cities where scholars debated under the stars and kings bowed beside paupers. Now that you wear the crown, the pilgrimage isn't just a personal journey. It's a diplomatic mission, a spiritual proving ground, and, if you're being honest, an opportunity to place Mali firmly on the map. You start planning. Not quietly, no. That would be impossible. The scope of your Hajj swells like the Niger River after the rains. By the time you're done, the caravan numbers more than 60,000 people. That's not a typo. You bring soldiers for protection, griots for storytelling, judges for settling disputes on the road, cooks to prepare meals, herders to tend flocks, and even singers to keep morale high. And yes, camels, hundreds of them, burdened with gold, silk, embroidered cloths, and gifts. You don't just want to arrive in Mecca. You want the world to feel you coming. As the caravan departs Niani, people gather along the roadside, eyes wide at the seemingly endless procession. Children giggle as camels pass by with golden tassels swaying from their harnesses. Elders clasp their hands in prayer. The sand kicks up, the sun blazes overhead, and still you walk, You cross forests, rivers, and eventually the ocean of sand that is the Sahara. You try not to romanticize it, because the desert is brutal. The heat presses against your skin like a second body. Your lips crack, your eyes sting, and still you walk. You pass skeletons of caravans less fortunate, their bleached bones half swallowed by dunes. At night, you huddle near the fires and listen to tales from your entourage. Some true, some less so, all wrapped in laughter and flame. In Cairo, things take an interesting turn. You're welcomed with open arms, but your generosity causes an economic ripple, let's call it that. You distribute so much gold, lavishly, impulsively, often just to show your goodwill, that prices spiral. The market inflates. Gold loses value. A classic case of too much of a good thing. Historians still argue whether you did it intentionally, to make a statement about Mali's wealth, or if you were just carried away by the moment. Either way, Cairo would remember you for years, long after your caravan had left. In Mecca, the atmosphere shifts. You're no longer the star of the show. You're one of thousands, equal in devotion. That's the beauty of the Hajj. You shed your silks and fine things and don the simple white garments of a pilgrim. You walk side by side with men from Persia, Yemen, Anatolia, each with stories, scars, and prayers of their own. You bow, prostrate, and whisper invocations beneath your breath. There is something deeply humbling about it, like wind brushing away ego. While in Mecca, you also meet scholars, learned men who speak of philosophy, law, and science with ease. You listen, ask questions, invite some to return with you. It's a sort of intellectual trade. You offer gold, they offer wisdom. These men would later help elevate Timbuktu's reputation as a center of learning, though that comes later in your story. As the months pass, your caravan begins the long return home. You retrace your steps, through cities you've disrupted with your generosity, through deserts that seem less menacing now. And when you finally glimpse Niani again, your heart swells. You left as a king. You return as a legend. But there is still work to be done. You step back into Niani with dust on your robes and sunlight caught in your beard. The long journey behind you hasn't worn you down. It's tempered you like iron in a smith's fire. The people are waiting. They line the roads with palm fronds and drums, singing your praises with the kind of poetry that makes your cheeks warm despite the heat. They say the Mansa who walked the desert and returned with wisdom and glory, they say. It has a ring to it. You'd blush, but you're a little too busy thinking about logistics. Because now you have the full weight of an empire to rule, and it's no longer enough to just hold it steady. You've seen Mecca, Cairo, and the great courts of the Islamic world. You've witnessed how knowledge flows like rivers between cities, how scholars are courted like nobility, and how infrastructure can elevate entire civilizations. Mali may be rich, yes, but wealth alone won't outlast your bones. So, you begin. The first thing you do is establish Timbuktu as the intellectual heartbeat of your realm. Now, it's true. Timbuktu had already existed for centuries before you came along. It had been a small but busy Tuareg trading post along the Niger, a hub where camel caravans offloaded salt from the Sahara and picked up gold, cola nuts, and grain. But under your rule, it transforms into something far grander. You build, or fund the building of, mosques, learning centers, and libraries. The most famous is the Sankor Mosque, which you don't just restore, but repurpose as a seat of scholarship. It's not just a place to pray, but a place to think. You invite jurists from Cairo, astronomers from Al-Andalus, doctors from Fez. Some stay for a season, some never leave. Soon, students from all corners of Mali come to study. Picture it, the stone courtyards filled with eager young men, debating the finer points of Maliki jurisprudence under shade trees. The soft scratch of reed pens writing on palm leaf paper. The low hum of Quranic recitation drifting from classrooms. By some accounts, at its height, Sankore University would rival even Al-Azhar and Cordoba, with tens of thousands of manuscripts in its libraries. Some historians dispute those numbers, of course. They argue whether the figures are exaggerated or confused with later periods. But one thing is clear. Your investment sets the stage for Timbuktu's golden age. But you don't just stop with Timbuktu. You extend your attention to other cities, Jenne, Gao, Walata. You improve roads and reinforce trade routes. You install governors loyal not just to your crown, but to your vision. They know that to rule under Mansa Musa is to prioritize law, learning, and fairness. That doesn't mean they always obey, of course. There's still scheming, border scuffles, and the occasional grain hoarding scandal. But now there are systems to deal with those things. Courts, clerics, and traveling envoys. Speaking of systems, you start standardizing weights and measures. Not exactly the most exciting reform, you think, until you realize that consistent coinage and measurements reduce disputes, increase trust, and help farmers and merchants alike sleep a little better at night. You don't just want people to trade. You want them to feel secure while doing it. You also make sure Islamic law is integrated more deeply into your administration. This isn't just about piety. It's about predictability. Sharia courts offer a shared language of justice that stretches from Cairo to Cordoba. If a merchant from Fez knows he'll get a fair hearing in Jenne, he's more likely to do business there. Still, you're not blindly imposing one system. You blend it carefully with indigenous traditions, something many modern historians admire about your rule. You allow for local councils to resolve domestic disputes. A woman in the countryside might still consult her village elders about marriage matters, while a merchant in Timbuktu might appeal to a qadi trained in Mecca. And here's something your advisors think is a little eccentric, but it works. You start recording dreams. Not your own, necessarily, but those reported by commoners who believe their visions are divine messages. You assign griots and scribes to collect and catalog these dreams, just in case. Why? Because you know people trust symbols. And when people feel heard, even in dreams, they feel more rooted to their leaders. Plus, you admit, you find some of the dreams fascinating. One, for instance, tells of a lion sleeping at the foot of your throne. Another of a millet stalk that grew tall enough to touch the moon. Do you believe in them? Maybe. But more importantly, they give you insight into the hopes and fears of your people. Diplomats from other Muslim empires begin arriving in Niani more frequently. Some bring books, others bring gifts, a few bring proposals of marriage for your daughters. You entertain them all, using every interaction as a thread to weave Mali deeper into the global fabric. You exchange manuscripts with the Hafsids in Tunisia. You trade horses with the Mamluks. Your scribes even begin keeping track of weather patterns and rainfall, perhaps inspired by Persian almanacs you brought home. And then there's architecture. Inspired by the towering minarets of Cairo and the redstone mosques of Arabia, you fund new buildings in Niani itself. Some are tall, others wide, but all follow a distinct blend of West African and Islamic styles, thick mud walls, wooden Toran beams, and geometric patterns. The Jinguereber Mosque in Timbuktu becomes one of the most iconic. You commission it with an architect from Andalusia, Abu Ishaq es Saheli, who introduces new techniques while still using local materials. Some scholars debate how much was truly designed by him versus local builders, but either way, it stands. Still, as your empire flourishes, challenges don't disappear. You have rivals. Songhai, a restless vassal to the east, is beginning to test your boundaries. You hear rumors of uprisings, raids on trade caravans, even whispers of defiance in the city of Gao. You respond not with immediate war, but with messengers, gold, and, where needed, a show of strength. You know that conquest without diplomacy is like fire without air. It dies fast. Yet, even with all your reforms, not everything runs smoothly. Some of your new tax policies are unpopular in rural areas. There are murmurs that you've favored urban elites and foreign scholars over traditional Mandé leaders. You try to listen, to adjust, but governing an empire the size of Western Europe with no phone, no email, and only fast horses and good memory. Not exactly easy. Still, your name begins to reach places you've never even heard of. Venetian traders mention you in letters. Egyptian scribes debate your lineage. Even Ibn Khaldun, the great North African historian who will write just after your time, will struggle to sort out which tales are real and which are legend. And that's the strange truth. You're already becoming a myth, even while you still breathe. By now, you can feel it. That slow, weighted awareness that your days as ruler are longer behind you than ahead. The air tastes the same. The gold still gleams, and the markets of Timbuktu sing with life. But your joints creak louder than the camel carts, and sometimes you find yourself waking at dawn not with energy, but with memory. You're not sad. You've done what few could. You've made Mali into more than a patchwork of villages and caravans. You've turned it into an idea. But now you must consider what happens when you are no longer here to guide it. And so your attention turns to legacy. Succession isn't just about blood. It's about timing. You remember what happened when your predecessor vanished across the Atlantic. Confusion, panic, scramble. That won't be your story. You begin grooming your son, Maga, carefully and early. Not just with fanfare, but with practical experience. You send him on regional tours, let him preside over disputes, read over legal petitions, walk among the merchants and masons. Let him sweat a little in the hot seat. Now, Maga, he's dutiful, thoughtful, even. But he's not you. He doesn't have your instinct for spectacle, your deep craving for knowledge, or that strange magnetism that makes people bend toward your will like iron filings to a lodestone. Still, he's steady, and steady, you've learned, is underrated. Around this time, you also begin retreating from the day-to-day bustle of rule. Not entirely, you still sign decrees, receive envoys, consult with judges. But more and more, you let your viziers and governors take the front lines. You observe, advise. You shift from storm to sunbeam. Your evenings lengthen. You begin taking slow walks along the Niger, listening to griots recite your own life, exaggerated and sweetened like date syrup. You catch them claiming your footsteps healed the sick, or that your gold cured hunger across 5 continents. You chuckle softly. You let them have their myths. They need them more than you do now. Still, you're not done. You decide to pour the last of your strength into a project that feels both intimate and eternal. The preservation of knowledge. You start with the scribes. Books on astronomy, medicine, mathematics, and law. You commission copies from as far away as Cairo and Damascus, then pay local calligraphers handsomely to translate or copy them onto smooth leather parchment. You encourage scholars to annotate in the margins, to argue with the text. One of your most prized volumes, according to later accounts, includes a diagram of the stars over the Sahel, with footnotes written in 3 languages: Arabic, Songhay, and Pular. Historians today still debate how many of these manuscripts were actually created during your reign versus your successors. Some argue the Timbuktu libraries are more a legacy of the 15th and 16th centuries. But even they admit it started with you. With your vision of a Mali where knowledge didn't just travel through sand and trade, but through ink and memory. Meanwhile, the economic engine you set into motion continues humming. Gold still flows from the mines in Bambouk and Bouré, and salt caravans still plod southward from Tagaza and Taoudeni. You notice that merchants have begun using Arabic numerals more frequently, and contracts now carry wax seals, borrowed customs adapted to local flavor. Even architecture evolves. New homes in Timbuktu start featuring small courtyards, water basins, and shaded awnings, reflecting an Andalusian influence softened by Sahelian winds. And yet, behind this wealth and wonder, shadows flicker. You hear rumors, more persistent now, of the Songhai people growing restless. They chafe under your governors, whisper about autonomy. You'd hoped diplomacy and shared prosperity would be enough. But Songhai has tasted independence before, and like a camel denied water, it longs for its own well. Your generals urge a show of strength, but you hesitate. War is not the legacy you want stamped on your final years. Instead, you attempt compromise, easing certain tribute demands, offering local leaders honorary titles, reassigning tax officers. It works, for now. But you know, the center is strong, but the edges fray. And then, like smoke, news begins to drift in from even farther afield. Venetian traders mention Mali more frequently in their letters, sometimes in tones of disbelief. They marvel at an empire where gold dust is measured by the bowlful, where kings build libraries in mud cities, and where desert routes pulse like arteries across a continent they still barely understand. You hear that a Catalan map maker, a man you will never meet, is sketching your likeness on a parchment globe, placing you in a throne somewhere near the Senegal River, holding a nugget of gold in your hand. His crown is wrong, and the proportions are laughable. But still, you're on the map. Mali is on the map. You've become a calendar. And yet, you are still flesh. Aging. You feel it in your spine when you kneel to pray. You feel it in the quiet moments when your vision swims and your hands shake, just slightly. Sometimes you retreat to the mosque courtyard and let the sun warm your face. You listen to the distant laughter of children practicing their Arabic. You hear birds nesting in the wooden torons above. You feel something like peace. You call Maga more often now. Sit with him longer. Talk less about politics and more about patience, about watching for drought years, about listening to dreams, about how power doesn't make you strong, restraint does. He listens. You don't know exactly when the end will come, but you sense it won't be loud. Not a blaze of spears or a collapsing throne. No, it'll be quieter than that. A final prayer whispered under a tamarind tree. A slow breath out as the call to Maghrib echoes across the Niger. And you're all right with that. In the final twilight of your reign, the days grow heavier, and the pace of the world seems to slow. Just slightly. just enough to let you feel the shift. You no longer ride through the streets of Niani in a thunder of hooves and applause. You no longer review troops in their glinting armor under the high sun. Instead, you move quietly now, often carried in a cushioned palanquin or assisted by young attendants whose steps echo faintly on the marble floors. And yet, despite this softer pace, your mind is sharper than ever. In fact, it's only in these quieter years that you finally have the luxury to think, not just to rule, not just to command, but to reflect. You are, after all, not merely a ruler anymore. You are a living legend. The griots speak your name with reverence as though it already belongs to the past. Small children in Timbuktu recite tales of your gold-dusted pilgrimage like scripture. Old traders in Jannah tell their apprentices how the markets changed after your journey to Mecca. You've become a kind of half-shadow, half-statue, admired from afar, whispered about in the corners of mosques and under the stars during long caravan rides. But you are still here, still alive, still watching the empire you shaped stretch and settle into itself like a great river flowing beyond its banks. Your health, however, is no longer what it once was. The palace healers, men trained in herbal medicine, West African wisdom, and Islamic healing traditions, prepare tonics that smell of garlic, honey, and something else you can't quite place. Perhaps it's baobab bark. Perhaps it's ground kola nut. The concoctions vary by the day, and some are more palatable than others. You sip them anyway, because even in old age, you play your part. Your legs ache. The stiffness in your joints sometimes keeps you from morning prayers at the mosque, so the imam visits you instead. On those mornings, the Quranic recitations drift through your chambers like perfumed smoke, settling gently into your bones. You spend your afternoons beneath a carved canopy in the royal gardens. Gardens you ordered planted years ago. Tamarind trees, mangoes, frangipani blossoms. Their scents mingle in the breeze. Birds you cannot name flit between the branches, and once in a while, a monkey screeches from a distant corner, reminding you that life, no matter how dignified, is never far from mischief. From this shady perch, you listen to reports from across Mali. Couriers arrive from Gao, from Jannah, even from far-off Tuareg settlements in the Sahara. They speak of salt caravans, of river floods, of small squabbles and major triumphs. You no longer involve yourself in every dispute. That is your son Maga's role now. You are teaching him gently from behind the veil of semi-retirement, allowing him to step into power while your shadow still lingers behind him, comforting and colossal. And he is learning. Maga listens. He asks questions. He meets with elders, soldiers, religious scholars, and market inspectors. You watch him from a quiet place, nodding slowly when he handles something wisely, and saying little when he stumbles. The empire needs to see him lead, but more importantly, he needs to see himself lead. One day, a crisis brews between two merchant clans, one Mandinka, one Tuareg, arguing over salt tax collection along the northern trade routes. It's an issue that could easily ignite old prejudices. You've seen such tensions boil before. But Maga assembles a council, listens patiently, and settles the matter not with force, but with diplomacy and clever compromise. He even invites both clans to share a meal in the palace courtyard afterward. You watch it unfold from your chamber window and think, he may yet carry this burden well. Not everything is peaceful, of course. Some governors, especially in the outer provinces, test the limits of their autonomy. One such chief, based near the fringes of Songhai land, openly delays tribute payments. A few decades ago, that would have earned him a personal visit, perhaps with an army. Now, you write a letter instead, carefully worded, polite, but unmistakably firm. A few weeks later, the tribute arrives, along with a personal apology and a small gilded statue of a camel. You smile at the gift. The man knows your sense of humor. Still, you feel time slipping. So you begin your final projects, quiet, intentional ones. You commission more Quranic schools in small villages where only oral traditions have held sway. You expand the libraries in Gao and Nayani, ensuring that scrolls from Arabia, Andalusia, and North Africa are copied by hand and preserved. These texts, you believe, are just as valuable as salt and gold, perhaps more so. One day, you call for your personal librarian, an elderly scholar from Fez who's served you since your pilgrimage days. You sit together in the library courtyard, surrounded by stacks of parchment and the soft rustle of palm fronds in the wind. "I want a book written," you tell him. He raises an eyebrow. "On what subject?" "Everything," you reply. "The empire, the gold, the pilgrimage, the laws, the lessons." He nods slowly. "A chronicle." You smile. "A memory." And so, in your last years, you begin dictating what will become the Mansa Scrolls. An unofficial name, but one that the scribes adopt anyway. These aren't just royal boasts. They're meditations. You speak of leadership, yes, but also of failure. You describe the loneliness of power, the doubts that woke you before dawn. You tell of the children in Cairo, barefoot and curious, who followed your caravan chanting songs. You even mention the time you mistook cinnamon for pepper and nearly sneezed your way through a diplomatic dinner. Your humility endears the scribes. They record everything. And years later, those scrolls will survive long after empires fall. Historians still argue about them. Some say they were edited, embellished by later rulers. Others claim the tone is too personal, too self-aware, to be anything but your true voice. But you know the truth, and the truth doesn't always need agreement to exist. As the seasons turn, your dreams grow strange. Sometimes you see Mecca again, shining in moonlight. Sometimes you see your mother, her face aged and kind, beckoning from a doorway you don't recognize. Once you dream of the river Niger, but it's flowing backward, pulling you gently upstream. Your attendants begin to whisper more cautiously. The court grows quieter, even as festivals still take place. During Eid, you appear in public for what may be the last time, seated in a wooden throne beneath a canopy of blue silk. The crowd roars, but you hear it like waves from a distant shore. Maga sits beside you. You grasp his hand. "Soon," you whisper. He nods. When the end does come, it is gentle. You wake one morning and know this is the last morning. Not from pain. There's none. Just a profound stillness. The world feels hushed, as though the entire empire is holding its breath. You call for your family. The court gathers. Griots arrive and begin to hum. Not songs of mourning, but memories in melody. You give Maga one last instruction. Lead as if the earth listens, and then you close your eyes. The palace does not erupt in wailing. That was your command. Instead, there is silence. A stillness so vast that even the birds seem to pause. Across Mali, markets cease for a day. Goldsmiths let their fires go cold. Scholars gather in the libraries and whisper prayers. And somewhere near the bend of the great river, your tomb, simple, sun-warmed, and humble, is sealed. But of course, that is not where you end. You become a name in every story whispered over campfires. A face carved into walking staffs. a footnote in the travel logs of distant Venetian scribes, a dream in the minds of griots yet unborn. Mansa Musa, the king who turned gold into story, the river that remembered every name. After your final breath, the empire does not collapse into chaos. That's not how you raised it. It continues on with a rhythm you helped set in motion, like a great drum whose echo keeps time even after the drummer has walked away. Maga, your son, steps forward, not in your shadow, but on the path you cleared for him. And across Mali, the transition of power is observed not with riots or coups, but with quiet prayers and the lighting of lamps. Still, the absence of your presence is felt like a silence after music. You are no longer at the morning assemblies, your voice no longer calling for scrolls or water or news from Gao. But the palace feels your memory in every corridor, and Mali itself feels your shape, the empire molded by your will, your journeys, your faith, your gold. Maga's rule begins smoothly, but he's aware of the long shadow you left behind. The title of Mansa is heavy, and though it fits him well, it does not drape the same way it did on you. He is more cautious, more deliberate, perhaps too deliberate. Where you acted with wide strokes, a new city here, a massive pilgrimage there, Maga chooses small, quiet refinements. He adjusts tax codes. He expands a few mosques. He invests in camel breeding. The people do not complain. Life continues. The markets bustle. The salt caravans roll. The scholars teach. But it is different now. There's a subtle shift in the air, as though Mali is exhaling after a long breath held under your reign. And yet, you remain. Not physically, of course, but your image endures. 1 year after your death, a mural appears in Timbuktu. Painted in ochres and indigo, it depicts you seated on a throne, a golden orb in your hand, surrounded by stars and sand dunes. It's not entirely accurate. Your nose is too sharp and your robe is strangely Roman-looking. But the intention is clear, you are legend now. Later, that mural will inspire a new coin design, then a tapestry, eventually a griot's ballad. Your story becomes a kind of cultural shorthand, a symbol of what Mali once was at its very best. And far beyond Mali's borders, something odd begins to happen. In Europe, cartographers who've never stepped foot on African soil begin including you on their maps. There you are, drawn in profile on the 1375 Catalan Atlas, seated regally atop West Africa, wearing a crown too European and holding a golden orb that sparkles in illustrated sunlight. It is the first time many Europeans learn your name, but they don't pronounce it quite right. To them, you're Mesa Meli, or sometimes Emir of the Blacks, or simply that Golden King. They get your details wrong. They don't understand your religion, your culture, your lineage. But what they do understand, what sticks like sand between fingers, is the gold. Your name becomes synonymous with wealth. For centuries, travelers will repeat half-remembered tales of your pilgrimage, each version shinier than the last. They'll say you handed out gold so freely it ruined Cairo's economy for years. They'll say your caravan stretched for miles and included 100 camels each carrying hundreds of pounds of pure gold. They'll say your gifts of gold were so extravagant that even Venetian bankers whispered your name over ledgers. Some of this is true. Some is myth. Historians still argue about the exact scale, but none of it is easily forgotten. The irony? In life, you never sought wealth for wealth's sake. Gold was a tool, not a goal, a means to an end. The elevation of Mali, the glorification of your faith, the spread of knowledge. But legend doesn't always care for nuance. Even today, some people imagine you not as a real person, but as a kind of magical tycoon, a black Midas, a fantasy made of gold dust and desert winds. And yet, your truer legacy is not the weight of gold. It's the weight of your influence. The schools you built in Timbuktu? They become the famed Sankore University, a beacon of learning throughout the Muslim world. At its peak, Timbuktu will host thousands of students, scribes, and scholars from across Africa and beyond. Manuscripts copied by hand in your reign will travel through generations. Works on astronomy, law, medicine, philosophy, and poetry. Centuries later, European explorers will stumble across Timbuktu and assume it must be a myth. A city of gold in the middle of Africa, they scoff. And yet, when they arrive, they'll find not heaps of treasure, but something rarer. Libraries, scrolls, ideas. You helped plant those seeds. Maga continues some of your work, though he lacks your vision. His reign is steady but short-lived. He is followed by others, some capable, some less so. The empire continues, but like all great things, it begins to bend under its own weight. Trade routes shift. New threats arise. The Songhai, once allies and tributaries, grow bolder. Eventually, they will overtake Timbuktu, but even they will remember you with reluctant admiration. You're like a mountain that shapes the weather long after it stops growing. But not all memories are grand. In the centuries that follow, Mali's borders contract. Colonial maps redraw the lines. Your name is faded, then misplaced, then omitted entirely. European textbooks barely mention you, and where once your portrait adorned the best maps in Christendom, now you are reduced to a footnote, if that. This forgetting is slow, invisible almost, like a slow-moving fog that dulls even gold. But you are not entirely erased. In West Africa, griots still sing. They pass down your name, your journey, your parables. Some say you were descended from Bilal, the first muezzin of Islam. Others say you could talk to lions. Some even claim that on the day you died, a golden bird flew over the palace and sang a song no one had heard before, or since. In classrooms in modern Mali, children learn that they are descended from empire. That once, their ancestors built a kingdom that shimmered across the Sahel. That gold was not the point, but the punctuation. And then, the 21st century dawns. The internet begins to spread stories again, old stories, rediscovered and reshared. Young historians tweet about you. Documentaries dust off your legend. Someone writes an article. The richest person who ever lived, and you've never heard of him. It goes viral. People in California and Cairo and Copenhagen read about your pilgrimage, about the time you gave away so much gold it destabilized a city's economy, about the libraries, the architecture, the forgotten majesty. Your face appears on screen again, not on parchment, not in mosaic, but in pixels. A video game names a city after you. A rapper invokes your wealth. A professor argues that you should be taught in world history classes alongside Caesar and Napoleon. Gradually, the fog lifts. A little. You're not here to see it, of course, but if you were, you might smile. Not because you're remembered, but because Mali is remembered. Because your story is being whispered again into new ears, across new campfires, in new tongues. Because long after the gold is spent, the echo remains. You always knew, deep down, that legacies weren't measured in currency. They were measured in questions left behind. In people who ask, who was Mansa Musa? And then keep listening. And now, somewhere, someone is listening. You're not around to hear the first European sea captain utter the word Timbuktu, like it's a spell. But the impact of your legacy continues to ripple far beyond your empire's fading borders. With each retelling, your story mutates, still rooted in fact, but stretched like leather over the frame of curiosity, envy, and imagination. Back in Mali, time marches on. The empire begins to splinter, first in whispers, then in open conflict. The sons of your successors, grandsons, and cousins and generals begin to see opportunity in division. Provinces grow more autonomous. Taxes stop flowing as freely. Timbuktu, once the shining intellectual jewel of your kingdom, becomes contested territory, a prize for whoever can control its wealth and scholarly prestige. The Songhai, Mali's former vassals, rise quickly in the 15th century. They are hungry, efficient, and bold. Under leaders like Sunni Ali and Askia Muhammad, they sweep through the region like a windstorm, seizing Timbuktu and claiming the Niger River's most vital trade routes. By the end of the 1400s, Songhai has effectively replaced Mali as the dominant empire in West Africa. Still, the bones of your influence remain. The mosques you funded, still standing, the manuscript libraries of Sankore, hidden, protected, revered. There are stories of families burying scrolls in clay pots during invasions to keep knowledge safe. Others pass them down like heirlooms, precious not for their monetary worth, but for what they represent. A time when West Africa was a beacon, not a backwater. And across the ocean, something stirs. In Europe, the age of exploration is heating up. Portugal, Spain, France, each looking for spices, silk, and gold. Always gold. Some explorers have heard the stories of a black king so wealthy he disrupted Mediterranean economies. They don't remember your name, not precisely, but they're looking for what you symbolized. When Portuguese ships edged down the West African coast in the 15th century, your legend sails with them. Some scholars even argue that your golden reputation played a quiet role in igniting the European thirst for African exploration. They weren't just chasing El Dorado in the New World, they were also chasing echoes of you. But your empire by then is already fading into memory. By the 1600s, Mali is a shadow of itself. Timbuktu, though still famous, is often caught in the crossfire of rival factions. The city suffers under Moroccan invasion. Manuscripts are scattered, buildings damaged. The glorious Mansa lineage grows murky, broken apart by time and politics. You'd be forgiven for thinking your story would disappear entirely, swept away by sand and war. But then, centuries later, just as the modern world begins to forget you entirely, someone remembers. In the 19th century, European colonial historians come across accounts of your pilgrimage in Arabic chronicles. Al-Umari, Ibn Khaldun, Al-Sa'di. They write of your wealth, your courtesy, your generosity, and these accounts don't sound like legend. They sound like documentation, real, vivid, human. And then something strange happens. In the 20th century, your story becomes a kind of educational whisper, taught briefly, if at all, in Western schools. Sometimes you are reduced to just a line, the richest man who ever lived. No context, no detail, just the gold. But in Africa, especially in Mali, the whispers never stopped. You remain part of the oral tradition, part of the cultural pride. Your image is painted on murals, mentioned in school books, and recalled in daily conversation. Street names, markets, and schools bear your name. And, as the post-colonial period unfolds and African nations gain independence, you become a symbol of what once was, and what could be again. By the time the internet arrives, your story has fresh soil to grow in. Documentaries appear on YouTube. Podcasts retell your journey to Mecca. TikTok creators try to explain how your caravan crashed the gold market. Teachers make animated explainer videos. Memes joke that you could have bought Amazon with pocket change. You are no longer a footnote. You are a curiosity. Then a conversation. Then a headline. Historians begin to argue more seriously about your place in the global pantheon. Shouldn't students learn about you alongside Caesar, Genghis Khan, and Charlemagne? Shouldn't your name be in the index of every world history textbook? Shouldn't people know that the richest man in recorded history was a West African Muslim king who used his wealth to fund scholarship, art, and cities? They don't all agree, of course. Scholars still debate your actual net worth. Was it truly more than Jeff Bezos or Augustus Caesar? They argue over the inflation-adjusted value of gold. But you, of course, don't care about that. You never measured success in bank accounts or ledgers. You measured it in mosques raised, teachers funded, scrolls copied, roads paved, and cities built. And when people search for you today, they find not just gold, but architecture. Not just treasure, but books. Not just fables, but footprints. The children of Mali today are the heirs to that footprint. They walk streets named after you, attend schools that study your era, and grow up hearing tales of a king who once walked to Mecca and made the world tremble, not through war, but through generosity. In 2021, Time magazine lists you among the most influential figures of all time. Documentaries frame your story as a revelation, a lost history rediscovered. And travelers once again visit Mali, eager to see the mosques, the manuscripts, the memory. Even amid political instability, there's a resilience in the soil of Mali. The land remembers, the people remember, the griots still sing. And you? You've gone from man to myth and back again, from misunderstood caricature to cultural icon, from the silent pages of a forgotten manuscript to the glowing screen of a bedtime history video. Someone, somewhere, is hearing your story for the very first time. And somewhere, a sleepy listener, maybe you, is lying in bed, wrapped in the gentle hum of a fan or the soft rustle of cotton sheets, imagining a kingdom that shimmered with learning, laughter, prayer, and possibility. You, the traveler with a heart full of gold and sand, have made it all the way home. You find yourself standing at the edge of an empire's twilight, where the golden sands of Mali stretch out, catching the last warm rays of a setting sun. The air is thick with stories, the laughter of children playing near the Niger River, the murmurs of scholars debating under the shade of ancient trees, the steady rhythm of traders packing their goods to journey once again along the old caravan routes. It is a time when the great Mali Empire, shaped by Mansa Musa's vision and vast wealth, begins to transform in ways both subtle and profound. You're here now, caught in the delicate moment between past grandeur and future change. The cities you once knew as bustling hubs of commerce and learning, Timbuktu, Gao, Djenné, still pulse with life, but their pace is different. The Golden Age, a period marked by incredible wealth, expansive scholarship, and political power, has begun to wane. Yet you sense that something enduring remains. Walk along the narrow streets of Timbuktu, and you can almost hear the echoes of footfalls from scholars carrying precious manuscripts, their voices a soft hum against the backdrop of the evening call to prayer. You notice the striking beauty of the mosques, those earthen structures that seem to grow from the very earth itself. The great mosque of Djenné, in particular, stands proudly, its towering pillars casting long shadows over the sun-drenched plaza. This architectural marvel, built with mud bricks and reinforced with palm branches, symbolizes the spiritual and cultural heart of the empire. It's not just a place of worship, it's a beacon of knowledge, attracting scholars from across the Islamic world. The buildings are warm to the touch, their surfaces slightly rough, carrying the fingerprints of generations of craftsmen. Yet, as you stroll through these cities, you notice subtle signs of change. The trade routes that once pulsed with caravans laden with salt, gold, and books have shifted. New powers are rising, and the delicate web of alliances and rivalries that underpinned Mali's dominance is evolving. The Songhai Empire, once a regional player, has begun to assert itself with renewed vigor. Its leaders, ambitious and formidable, seize control of key trading centers and challenge Mali's authority. The old empire's boundaries blur, and you realize you're witnessing the slow, inevitable ebb of one chapter before another begins. The political landscape is complex. Within Mali itself, local rulers and nobles jockey for influence, while the central authority struggles to maintain cohesion across the vast, diverse territories. You hear whispers among the marketplace crowds about distant conflicts and shifting loyalties. Some speak nostalgically of Mansa Musa's pilgrimage, recalling the awe it inspired and the economic ripple effects it sent through the Mediterranean world. Others debate the empire's future, uncertain but hopeful. Despite the political upheavals, the intellectual and cultural life of Mali continues to shine. The libraries of Timbuktu remain treasure troves of knowledge, their shelves laden with manuscripts on subjects ranging from astronomy and mathematics to poetry and Islamic law. Candlelight flickers against delicate parchment as scribes copy texts by hand, preserving wisdom for generations yet to come. The scent of ink, earth, and leather fills these quiet rooms, creating an atmosphere of reverence and curiosity. It's fascinating to note that historians still debate the extent to which your patronage directly influenced the blossoming of this scholarly culture. Some argue that Mali's intellectual achievements were part of a broader West African tradition that predated your reign. Others credit your generosity and support as the catalyst that transformed Timbuktu into a renowned center of learning. Either way, your impact is undeniable. You made education and faith cornerstones of the empire, setting an example that outlasted your lifetime. You also sense how your famous pilgrimage has taken on a mythic quality. Travelers far beyond Africa's borders recount tales of your journey to Mecca, marveling at the caravans of camels carrying unimaginable wealth and the generous distribution of gold that reshaped economies. These stories, passed from mouth to mouth and eventually inked onto European maps, contributed to a vision of Africa as a land of riches and grandeur. In some ways, you became a symbol of Africa's potential in the global imagination, even if later centuries clouded those perceptions. Closer to home, your legacy lives vividly in the oral histories of Mali's people. Griots, the master storytellers and historians, preserve your memory through song and story, weaving your deeds into the fabric of daily life. Their voices rise and fall in hypnotic rhythms around evening fires, bringing your story to life for young and old alike. These tales emphasize not just your wealth, but your wisdom, humility, and commitment to justice and learning. As night deepens, the flicker of oil lamps casts long shadows over the manuscripts in Timbuktu's libraries. The quiet turns almost sacred. You feel the pulse of history beneath your feet, the rise and fall of empires, the passage of ideas, the enduring power of knowledge and faith. The Mali you knew is changing, but its spirit remains strong, carried forward by those who value the past and dream of the future. In this moment of reflection, you understand that your reign was more than the sum of gold and grand gestures. It was about nurturing a vision of prosperity intertwined with learning and faith, of leadership grounded in generosity and humility. Though empires fall and time moves on, these values continue to resonate. So you close your eyes, letting the soft murmur of the Niger River soothe you. The golden light fades, replaced by a blanket of stars stretching endlessly overhead. Somewhere, a griot begins to sing, and the world feels vast, mysterious, and full of promise. Now, as you sink even deeper into stillness, let the last traces of Mali's golden sands drift gently from your mind. The bustling markets, the camel caravans, the dusty corridors of Timbuktu's ancient libraries. They all begin to fade, like old memories softened by time. Even the rustle of manuscript pages quiets, as if the scholars have finally closed their books for the night. Breathe in, slowly. Let your chest rise with the quiet rhythm of centuries past. Breathe out, even slower. Feel the air grow still, the edges of your thoughts softening like worn fabric. The world you just walked through, so full of color, sound, ambition, and faith, has gently curled itself up, folding neatly into the warm silence of night. You're floating now, weightless in the cradle of history. There's nothing to hold on to, nothing to worry about. Just the echo of a distant drumbeat, perhaps, or the sigh of wind across the dunes. Even that will pass. You are safe here, wrapped in the stories of those who came before. People who dreamed, who learned, who built, and who rested, just like you are doing now. Let their whispers carry you further. Let the warmth of Mansa Musa's world settle into your bones like a soft blanket. No need to follow the story any longer. It has served its purpose. The journey is done. You've wandered far tonight, through time and across deserts, and now it's time to sleep. Let the silence grow deeper. Let your body grow heavier. Let the stars blink slowly overhead, patient and unhurried. You are exactly where you need to be. You are home. You are asleep.